There is a woman whose name most history books never bothered to write down, and yet what she did shook an entire kingdom to its core, changed the fate of thousands of people, and exposed a secret so dangerous that even those closest to her never saw it coming. You are going to hear her story today, and I promise you, by the end of this, you will not be the same. My name is Amara Diallo, and if you are new here, welcome home. I created this channel, African Heritage Tales, because I believe that the most powerful stories ever told are the ones that history forgot to shout about. Every week, I bring you real stories from the heart of Africa, stories of strength, of sacrifice, of love, of betrayal, and of people who refuse to let the world erase them. These are not just history lessons. They are life lessons. Because inside every one of these stories, you will find something that speaks directly to your own life, the struggles you are carrying, the battles you are quietly fighting, the questions you are asking yourself at 2 in the morning when everything feels too heavy. Africa has been answering those questions for thousands of years. I am just here to make sure you hear the answers. So if nobody has told you yet, you found the right channel. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and let's go. Now. Back to this woman. Back to this story. Because what she did next, nobody saw it coming. Close your eyes for just a moment and imagine this. The year is somewhere in the late 1800s. The place is the sweeping, sun-scorched savanna of what is now Zimbabwe. The air smells like dry earth and wood smoke. Children laugh somewhere in the distance. Cattle low softly as the evening cools. And somewhere in a royal compound surrounded by tall thorn fences and the hum of a powerful kingdom, a young woman sits quietly, watching everything, saying very little, and understanding far more than anyone around her realizes. Her name was Lozikeyi, and she was about to become one of the most quietly powerful women in the history of southern Africa. To understand Lozikeyi, you have to understand the world she was born into. The Ndebele Kingdom, also called the Matabele Kingdom, was one of the most formidable states in all of 19th century Africa. It had been built by a warrior king named Lozikeyi, who had broken away from the Zulu Empire and carved out an entirely new world through sheer military genius. His son Lobengula inherited that kingdom, and with it, inherited all of its pressures, all of its enemies, and all of its impossible choices. Lobengula was a complex man, big in body, sharp in mind, and deeply burdened by the position he held. He was responsible for the lives of his people at a time when European powers were circling southern Africa like vultures waiting for their moment. And like many kings of that era, he had multiple wives. It was not unusual, it was expected. It was political, it was cultural, it was survival. Lozikeyi was one of those wives. But she was not just any wife. She was, by most accounts, one of Lobengula's favorites, and more importantly, one of his most trusted advisors. She was not loud about her power. She did not demand recognition. She simply watched, she listened, and she understood things about people that others missed entirely. Those who knew her described her as having a kind of quiet fire, warm to those she loved, immovable when she had made up her mind about something. But here is where the story begins to shift. Here is where the ground starts to tremble beneath the surface. Because Lozikeyi did not simply agree to share her husband with other women out of helplessness or resignation, she agreed, and she positioned herself with a precision that most people, even to this day, completely underestimate. And there was something she knew, something she had been watching build for years like a storm on the horizon, something that the men around her, the advisors, the warriors, the foreign visitors, thought she could not possibly understand. She understood it completely. The late 1880s were a terrifying time to be African royalty in southern Africa. The British South Africa Company, backed by the diamond and gold ambitions of Cecil Rhodes, was moving northward with a quiet, smiling ruthlessness. They came with treaties. They came with gifts. They came with words like concession and agreement and mutual benefit, and one by one, kingdoms that did not read the fine print found themselves swallowed whole. Lobengula was not naive. He knew exactly who Cecil Rhodes was. He knew what the Rudd Concession, the document he had been convinced to sign in 1888, actually meant once it was translated back to him properly. He had been told he was simply allowing a small number of men to dig in one area. What the paper actually said was that he had handed over mining rights to his entire kingdom. He was devastated. He tried to send word to Queen Victoria herself, tried to cancel it, tried to fight it through diplomacy. But by then the company men were already coming, hundreds of them, armed, organized, and very clear about what they intended to take. And Lobengula, caught between his pride as a king and the military reality that his impish, his warriors, and were facing rifles and artillery, was beginning to fracture under the pressure. He grew ill. He grew isolated. And in that isolation, the men around him began to whisper different things in different ears, and the kingdom began to splinter along fault lines that had always existed but never quite broken open. Until now. This is the moment you need to feel. Imagine loving someone who is being destroyed in slow motion and being unable to stop it. Imagine watching the world you were born into, the world that shaped you, that gave you your language, your rituals, your sense of who you are, being dismantled piece by men who smile while they do it. That is what Lozikeyi was living through. And she was not simply grieving, she was thinking. She had already begun to understand something that almost no one around her had fully reckoned with yet. If Lobengula fell, and by now it was becoming clear that fall was a possibility, what happened next would depend entirely on who was left standing and who still had the loyalty of the people. She began building that loyalty quietly, carefully. She maintained relationships with the Indunas, the chiefs and headmen. She kept the respect of the elder women who held enormous social power within Ndebele society. She was present at ceremonies. She remembered names. She remembered grievances. She was, in the truest sense, doing the work of governing without ever calling it that. And then came 1893, the year everything collapsed. The First Matabele War was not a war in the way most people picture wars. It was more like a machine meeting a wall and simply grinding through it. British South Africa Company forces, using Maxim guns, the early machine gun, moved against the Ndebele military with a technological advantage so overwhelming that traditional tactics simply could not answer it. Lobengula, who had tried desperately to avoid this confrontation, found himself watching his kingdom fall. He burned Bulawayo himself, his own capital, rather than let the British have it intact. That act alone tells you something about the man. He would rather destroy what he had built than let someone else claim it as their prize. And then he fled north, sick, broken, running with a small group of loyalists through the bush. He sent back his war chest, gold supposedly, with 2 indunas to offer it to the British as a peace gesture. Those 2 men were allegedly killed by their own escort before they could complete the mission, and the gold was never recovered. To this day, the location of Lobengula's gold is one of the great unsolved mysteries of Southern African history. Lobengula died in early 1894. The exact circumstances are still debated. Some say he died of smallpox, some say heartbreak, some say something else entirely. His burial place was never confirmed. The man who had led one of the most powerful kingdoms in the region died in the bush, alone, his kingdom already in the hands of men who did not belong there. And here is the part that no one prepared for. Because when Lobengula died, when the kingdom collapsed, when the British assumed that their victory was total and that Ndebele resistance was simply a matter of cleaning up, Lozikeyi was still there. She had not run, she had not hidden, she had not submitted. She had been watching, and now she was ready. In 1896, the Ndebele rose up again, this time in what is known as the Second Matabele War, or the Ndebele Uprising, or by its Ndebele name, Umvukela. This was not a spontaneous explosion of grief. This was organized. This was planned. And the role that Lozikeyi played in that uprising, the way she quietly helped coordinate resistance, the way she moved between communities, the way she used the social networks she had been building for years, was something the British never fully accounted for in their reports, because they did not think to look at her. That was their mistake. She was the thread that held pieces of the resistance together. She was the one people looked to when they needed to know whether to trust, whether to move, whether to hold. She had no army of her own. She had no official title. She was, by the conqueror's accounting, simply a widow, a former queen with no formal power in the new order they were building. But power is not always official, and influence does not always announce itself. Here is the final twist, the thing that even those who study this history sometimes overlook. After the uprising, when the British moved to consolidate control, when they could have imprisoned her, exiled her, or worse, they didn't. They negotiated with her. Cecil Rhodes himself came to the Ndebele, the great peace meeting, that eventually ended the conflict. And at that meeting, the voice of the Ndebele people was, in many ways, shaped by a woman who had been underestimated at every turn. She outlived the colonizers' expectations of her. She outlived the war. She outlived the assumption that defeat meant disappearance. Lozikeyi lived until around 1919, and until the end of her life, she was regarded by her people not as a relic of something lost, but as a keeper of something that could never fully be taken. Now let that sit with you for a moment. She agreed to share her husband. She agreed to exist within structures she did not design. She agreed to be seen as less than what she was by people who did not have the eyes to see her clearly. And inside all of that agreement, inside all of that patience, she was building something that would outlast empires. Here is what her story means for us today. There is a kind of power that the world does not recognize until it is too late to stop it. It is not the power of volume or force or title. It is the power of presence, of memory, of relationship, of understanding a room so completely that you know exactly when to move and exactly where to stand. Lozikeyi understood that surviving was not surrender, it was strategy, and that the people who write you off because they cannot see what you are doing are the very people most vulnerable to what you are about to do. In a world that still too often overlooks women, especially women from Africa, especially women from the 19th century, especially women who did not lead armies or sign famous documents, Lozikeyi's story is a reminder that history has always been shaped by people whose names never made the textbooks, and the fact that most of us are only now learning her name is not her failure, it is ours. She never needed us to know her name to do what she did, but we need to know it now. Because the world she fought to hold together, the culture, the identity, the dignity of her people, is still here, still breathing, still being carried forward by people who know where it came from. And it came, in part, from her. The final thing I want to leave you with is this. You will face moments in your life when the world asks you to accept less than you are worth, when the structures around you were built without you in mind, when the people with the loudest voices assume your silence means absence. In those moments, remember Lozikeyi. Remember that the most dangerous kind of strength is the kind that does not announce itself. Remember that patience, when it is paired with purpose, is not weakness. It is a weapon. And remember that history, real history, belongs not just to those who conquered, but to those who endured, adapted, and found a way to carry something precious forward through the fire. She agreed to share her husband, but what nobody expected, what nobody saw coming, was that she was never giving up a single inch of who she was. And that is Lozikeyi's story. If this video moved you, if something in Lozikeyi's journey gave you chills or made you think differently about strength and patience and surviving with your dignity intact, please share this video right now with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life a story like this might change. And I want to hear from you in the comments, because your voice matters on this channel. Tell me, which part of this story hit you the hardest? Was it the moment Lobengula burned his own capital rather than surrender it? Was it discovering that even after everything collapsed, Lozikeyi was the one the British had to sit down and negotiate with? Or was it something else entirely? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. And also tell me, what kind of stories do you want me to bring you next? What topics, what kingdoms, what unsung heroes are you hungry to learn about? Because wherever you want to go in African history, I will take you there. I will see you in the next story, and until then, carry something forward.